Call to order the joint city council planning commission meeting for October 3rd. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Curtis,
Present.
Commissioner Alpert.
Here.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Present.
Vice Chair Kuznick,
I'm here.
Chair Wallace,
I'm here as well.
Councilmember Perkins,
Here.
Councilmember Rubio. Here. Councilmember Veros,
Here.
Vice Mayor Armstrong is absent, and Mayor Hudson.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. So the first thing on the agenda is unfinished business, and that's a public hearing for general plan update 2023-2 and rezone 2023-002. Staff report, Cindy.
Okay, thank you and good evening. Go ahead and start my presentation this evening. Just a quick overview of the purpose of tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is our second joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting on the project. We will provide an overview of the progress since our last joint hearing in May. And expand on discussions from those previous meetings and ask for direction this evening as we move forward in our public hearing review. There will be 2 additional planning commission meetings that we're planning for. October 17th and November 7th is on the calendar, where we'll have further discussion on the project. So just a quick overview of where we last left off in May. We released the public review draft and began our public hearings on May 30th with our joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting. So since then, we've had, this would be our 6th Planning Commission hearing on the project. We've received feedback from various city committees, commissions on the update to the public review draft. We've also received written and verbal comments that have been collected and included in the previous staff reports. We've also prepared and released the draft environmental impact report for the project. And we've gathered a detailed list of changes that were recommended through this process and attached those as attachment E. So to date, we've had over 45 public engagement sessions, including public hearings, workshops, community meetings, and community events. Tonight, we're presenting the revised public review draft, attachment C, as the culmination of all the extensive public outreach process and includes the errata changes that show the track changes that have been made to the original public review draft since May. So if you refer to attachment C, you'll see that we've accepted all of the changes that were last presented at your May meeting and then inserted in all of the additional track changes that have been received and incorporated in since May, that May 24th draft was released. So that's one way to use the document, is looking at it as all of the changes that have been made originally, plus the new changes since May. So tonight, we just have a few discussion topics that we wanted to focus on, things that we've been discussing through our planning commission public hearings, and then kind of bringing us full circle as to where we are right now with our public review draft. So first off is figure A-3. This was last presented to the Planning Commission at their September 19th meeting. As we identified in Chapter 8, the resource open space and conservation element of the general plan, there is a resource management map. That map has been updated as part of this new general plan update. Figure 8-3 shows lands that are subject to hillside, creek, and ridgeline regulations. The zoning ordinance division D5 is what implements those standards within our resource management areas. So no changes have been made on figure 8-3 to the location or the identification of major ridge lines, minor ridge lines, or ridge lines that may be altered by grading. But there is one notable change that staff wanted to include as part of the discussion this evening. As presented on September 9th, the commission, what is shown in figure 8-3 are that any creeks that are located within built urban lands are no longer identified on figure 8-3. So creeks that are located in undeveloped resource management areas and lands above and below, both lands above and below 500 feet continue to be identified on figure 8-3.
So that would be a creek like near Windmill Farms. That's in a developed area. Is that right?
So Windmill Farms is in the Saramone Village specific plan. Saramone Village specific plan has their own separate resource management requirements. Even if the resource management map does not identify the creek in the Old Mill area, or I'm sorry, the Windmill Farms area, it's still subject to the creek requirements in the Saramone Village specific plan, which does still require the 100-foot creek setback in the Saramone Village specific plan area. So
can you give us an example then of a creek that no longer has?
yeah, so for example, there is a creek that's adjacent, that runs on the Church of the Valley property, where some of it is channelized and underground, culverted, but then some portions of it is above ground. With General Plan 2035, the figure 8-3 identified that as a creek, which then subjected to the 100-foot setback that's in the zoning ordinance. In figure 8-3 in the General Plan 2040 update, that creek is no longer identified on figure 8-3, and then therefore no longer subject to the resource management standards, including the 100-foot creek setback, because it's recognized now as built urban land. Similarly, Iron Horse Trail, there's creeks that run adjacent to that. That would be another example of creeks that would no longer be found on figure 8-3. So, and the purpose of the removal is twofold, as identified in your staff report. One goes back in time to when the resource conservation and ordinance 197 policies were in place for creekside preservation. In either of those, the RCOD district or ordinance 197 figure, no creeks were identified in the developed areas of the city. The only creeks identified in the figure that were subject to the 100-foot setback were located in undeveloped areas of the planning area boundary. So when figure 8-3 was digitized in General Plan 2020, along with subsequent renditions of that map, creeks were then unintentionally identified in the city's development area. So there's this map that shows the creeks, and it's a little difficult to see exactly all of the dashed lines, but the dashed lines do not exist in where you see what was the built urban land. You do see them in places like Doherty Valley or in the West Side area adjacent to the labor's property. But there was not any intention in the ridgeline and creek protection zone map or ordinance 187 that protected those creeks that were already in developed areas. And the second part of the update to figure 8-3 is related to program 19 in our adopted housing element. So program 19 identifies that different governmental constraints, and one of those that were identified was The Hillside Creek and Ridgeline development standards had the impact of making residential development difficult in those in urbanized areas. And so the direction in the housing element is for the city to update our standards to create greater flexibility for improvements in residential developments within 100-foot of the center line of a creek. And so creeks that are in undeveloped areas that are shown in Figure A-3 will continue to be protected through the resource management chapter of the zoning ordinance, as well as any state and federal regulations and local safety standards, including flood zones and federal permit requirements will still continue to apply to all creeks. And so this is just a diagram of the new Figure 8-3, where we intend to regulate ridge lines, creeks, resource management areas for lands above 500 and below 500 feet. And then the second topic for discussion is related to land use authority. This was a topic that also came up during our public hearing on September 19th with the Planning Commission. And so the request was to provide additional information regarding the city's legal authority to amend land use designations. So the city is proposing a number of amendments to a variety of parcels within the planning area. In addition to changes that we're making in the city core, like we've talked about DMU North and new mixed use standards, changes in the Saramone Village specific plan area, changing mixed use to now new land uses. We're also making changes to properties like the Gelderman property that are outside of the city limits, but in our planning area. So the city does have the authority to restrict land use and enact comprehensive land use zoning, land use and zoning laws through the police power. The California Constitution grants cities the ability to regulate things like zoning changes and land use changes. And so with the proposed update, it is within our authority of the California Constitution and other statutes and case law that allows us to make changes to land use like we're doing on the Gelderman property. And then the last topic is just revisiting our conversation about alternatives. We have released the general plan EIR. That is a programmatic draft EIR that has been prepared for the project. The analysis focuses on reasonably foreseeable direct and indirect physical environmental effects that could result from the update to the general plan. And alternatives to the proposed plan were evaluated and considered. And just as a reminder, we are still taking written comments on the draft EIR. That comment period opened August 30th, continues through October 16th. We're providing additional opportunities for the public to get involved with comments on the EIR. And once October 16th wraps up, then we'll have an update to all comments received and then bring that back at a future public hearing that has already been scheduled. So we have October 17th, we have November 7th, and then other tentative dates. So focusing now on just the alternatives that were included in the EIR, this is sort of a preview to the City Council. The Planning Commission did receive this presentation at their September 19th meeting. But in addition to the proposed plan that was analyzed, there were also 3 alternatives that were reviewed as part of the EIR. We have your standard no project alternative, that's alternative 1, which basically just assumes that we take exactly what's in the general plan right now, whatever has been built, we're just going to continue moving forward with all of the land uses without making any changes to that. So that's alternative 1. Alternative 2 is a alternative that includes new infill mixed use within the city core. plus additional retail shopping alternatives that we've included as one alternative. And then the third alternative is just increasing the infill within the mixed use city core area, but then not making any changes to the retail shopping areas. So all the retail shopping areas will continue to stay mixed use as they are already designated. And then we're just adding additional layer of mixed use within the city core. And so a summary of the findings of the EIR alternatives is that alternative 2 was determined to be the environmentally superior alternative. Yes,
Can I ask you to go back one page there
Yes.
to the alternatives?
yes.
There's a little note down at the bottom that says assumes 2.92 persons per household. Was it the intent of this chart to take the residential units and multiply them by 2.92 to get the additional population estimate?
No, so there is a slight factor for vacancy rate. So population does have to include a vacancy rate. If there's a 5% vacancy rate, that's included. So even though there's a persons per household and we're creating new units, 2.92, there is an assumption that not all units will be occupied.
90% of the residential units times 2.92.
Yes, it includes a factor for vacancy rate.
Okay, thank you.
So alternative 2, as I mentioned, is considered the environmentally superior alternative. That's the conclusion of the draft environmental impact report. As I mentioned, we're still in our comment period, and so we're waiting on that comment period to conclude. But at least with the draft environmental impact report, it was found to be environmentally superior because of a couple of different reasons. One, development would be more centralized in Saramone and thus results in lesser impacts to cultural resources, wildfire risks, and transportation, although not to the extent of reducing the significant levels where you would reduce it to a significant unavoidable impact. Because right now, the environmental impact report still identifies that there will be significant unavoidable impacts on the transportation side. So this new alternative, even though we're focusing additional growth in the core of the city and then also providing changes to mixed use zones to make those retail, they will have a environmental benefit, but not to the level where we're reducing the significance level. So just want to make that clear, but the point being that development then becomes more centralized with alternative 2. And then another reason is that the project alternatives that are outlined in the Saramone's long-range physical and economic development policies, our vision has been to increase commercial opportunities in the city core, as well as resource conservation that reflects the community's aspirations and the smart growth mandate. So again, development within the urban growth boundary, closer to where urban services are provided or currently exist, reducing the need to extend utilities that may not exist right now into outerlying areas and focusing those utilities within what's already in the current infrastructure plan. And then another reason is it builds on the past directions of what we've discussed over these last 45 different community engagements, direction from the City Council and Planning Commission. So alternative 2, again, talks about infill in the city core, specifically where Chevron Park and portions of BR1 property are located, evaluating the change of those properties from what's currently an administrative office land use designation to now a downtown mixed use designation. So that change, in addition to land use changes to preserve the retail shopping centers. So you see a number of our shopping centers that are identified in that alternative that will now be changed from a mixed use land use destination to a retail shopping destination. And that then furthers the the recommendations that we've received through our retail analysis to create these mixed-use village in the city core, and then to provide incentivized reinvestment on our retail properties. So not sure if anybody caught this. We did update the maps and we did create an outline for city core. So on the far right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a yellow boundary line that kind of defines where city core is. That's in your chapter 4 land use element. But when we talk about city core, we're discussing the alternative here, changing the upper portion of the city core where currently you have shopping centers that are designated mixed use and mixed use commercial will now go to a straight retail shopping designation. That's in the darker orange color that borders north and south of Crow Canyon Road. And then you have the downtown mixed use south replacing the office designation south of Bollinger Canyon Road. So those are the two changes that are analyzed in alternative 2 based on the direction that we received about the city core. And then also in the city core area is the marketplace alternative that was also evaluated. So currently in existing, you'll see that's mixed use. Alternative 2 evaluates the change to a portion of the marketplace shopping center converting to retail shopping. And then the last change that's identified in alternative 2 is a portion of what's called Country Club Village. That's going to be changing from mixed use to retail shopping. So that is the extent of alternative 2 and what changes were reviewed as part of that alternative. And then that
What constitutes alternative 3?
alternative 3 is only going to be the downtown mixed use south change to the Chevron and BR1 properties from office to downtown mixed use south. It does not evaluate changing those retail shopping centers like Marketplace, Country Club Village, Crow Canyon Commons, and the Magnolia Square property. Yes.
So is the south alternative is it same as alternative 3 we are saying?
So there's a slight difference between alternative 2 and alternative 3. And when you go back to our
Yeah, so
table
not
here.
between alternative 2 and 3, but I'm asking about south alternative and alternative, where the south alternative falls into? Is it
Oh,
about
I see.
alternative 2 or 3?
DMU South, is that what you're referring to?
That's right, yeah.
So DMU South is in those land use change will actually be in both alternative 2 as well as alternative 3. And we'll have zoning standards that would implement that DMU South.
Okay, so it's a combination of both alternative 2 and alternative 3 when we say south alternative.
I would say that alternative 2 is a combination of alternative 3 and alternative 2. So as opposed to alternative 3 is only just DMU South,
Okay,
not changing any of the other land uses that were identified in alternative 2. Alternative 2 adds an additional layer of change.
okay, so alternative 2 is alternative 2 plus 3. Okay,
Well, it has Crow Canyon Commons and Country Club Village.
If I point you to the table, this may better help explain what is happening here. So when you look at the difference between alternative 2 and alternative 3, you'll see that the non-residential gross square footage stays the same. But what changes is that because the retail shopping centers still allow for a potential for residential and commercial on those properties, it has the ability to increase residential capacity in the city because of the ability to create more residential units on a mixed-use site. On a retail shopping destination, there's no residential potential for those properties, at least in the conventional land use regulations that our city has. So you would not be able to build residential units on the retail shopping sites. That's why you're seeing in alternative 3 additional residential units there, is because when you are identified as mixed use, you have the option to build residential units there. If you take away the mixed use and redesignate those to retail shopping, it now doesn't have additional residential capacity.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions of staff or commissioners, starting from the right?
Let's start at that and work our way. I have one question. So I was reading over with the city's land use. And it says that the zoning ordinance will survive a challenge as long as it is not clearly arbitrary and unreasonable. Who decides if something is arbitrary and unreasonable?
I'm gonna-
Judge.
We almost
I-
agree.
I'm going to turn this over to the city attorney's office just to get the legal opinion here.
Well, yeah, I think your instincts are correct that it is a legal standard, and it's that there's no basis in fact for the decision that's made. It's a very deferential standard to the decision makers here.
Then the landowner could challenge it and saying that you're just making a decision that has not been seen at other places or other areas zoning. So it could be seen as arbitrary and unreasonable at that point.
I suppose that's possible, but again, that there's a lot of deference granted to the decision makers.
But isn't there any case law this already? Has there been challenged before? Any case law on this? I don't know.
Case law for San Ramon.
Yeah, like, if you're challenging it, you probably go and you challenge it, judge decides it, the probably precedent on this.
I don't recall if we've had a challenge to our general plan adoption. You can file a lawsuit objecting to the city's adoption of the general plan on, whatever grounds they feel that they have.
Go ahead, Gary.
Just to clarify the alternative 3 discussion, that is not to be decided until we've completed the EIR comment period. Is that correct?
Yes, so we're providing you with the update since our last meeting. And I know at the planning commission meeting, we've already covered the EIR, so I thought it would be helpful to have that just bring us up to speed as a joint session today. But ultimately, if you have at least, we've already heard from this body that they individually, I think that the maps that we've previously presented on May 30th, that there was a preference for the alternative maps that we've previously presented. If that continues to be the direction of this body, when we get to the completion of our public comment period, we will have to then make a decision on whether the project findings or the environmental findings, and if your 2 bodies decide that which alternative that they'd like to go with, whether it's the project or any of the alternatives that were presented, that's how we'll move forward with the resolution. But assuming I'm not hearing any changes to the alternatives, we will also be doing some additional work with things like policies and things that would support, if we were to choose one of those alternatives, what would those policies then look like if we get through the adoption process.
And that sounds like work for October 17th, for us at least.
Well,
Yeah.
October 17th will be right after the close of the EAR period. We will not have yet had an opportunity to provide a response to comments received, but we will expect to have that for your November 7th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So I just want to point out and ask you to clarify. I think I already know the answer, but on the map about the marketplace, the general plan use proposed, it's noteworthy that the way we have indicated our preference is in indicating the rest of marketplace as retail shopping would sort of put the kibosh on marketplace being chewed up bit by bit for housing mixed use the way we had perhaps worried about.
So I'm going to go back to that map just so that it's clear when I'm describing it. When we talk about the marketplace, everybody maybe has a different opinion of what exactly is the marketplace. So I want to just make sure that we all know when we talk about the marketplace, what we're talking about. The marketplace includes the larger parcel, that's the southern piece. So adjacent to Al Costa, that's, well, let me start over. I'm going to start from far left corner and go right. So when we refer to the marketplace, there's a marketplace west and a marketplace east that oftentimes get lumped together as the marketplace. And that includes the hotel adjacent to the Iron Horse Trail, the gas station, the medical office building just south of the gas station. Then you have the what's referred to as the Sports Mason or previously Orchard Supply Center. Then you move east of Marketplace, the roadway. Then you have the library, the portions that are along Montgomery Place that are between Bollinger and north of Trader Joe's. And then you have the larger piece that's south of Montgomery. That is the other portion that we also refer to as the marketplace. So when we talk about marketplace, that's that entire block. As far as the change that's happening on the alternative, the retail shopping destination is that portion in red that you see that's labeled retail shopping on the right-hand side, the proposed. That's the portion that's going to be redesignated from what's currently mixed use to retail shopping. The remainder of the marketplace, aside from the library will also go to public, semi-public, just to recognize that it's always going to be a public, semi-public piece because it's owned by the city. And I don't expect that we'll change our minds about where the library should be located. But beyond that, we have housing opportunity sites that we've committed to in the housing element. So those will continue to remain mixed use. But beyond that, that's where we've narrowed in where we can make changes to retail shopping. That's what we came away with.
Chair Wallace.
Good evening. Do you have the attachments to your staff report handy?
Yes.
Let's start with attachment A, page 1. And I promise I won't go through every single page. Close, but not. All right, that sounds like a challenge. Okay. Tell me when you're ready. Some of the questions I have on some of the pages are very specific and very short.
So we're starting
Answer.
with the exhibits.
Yes,
Yes.
attachment A, what we're referring to is the Doherty Valley mixed use site.
Okay.
Okay, my question has to do with the far right-hand corner, which is the zoning district for the that's proposed. In connection with the title, there's a phrase, quote, proposed paren, no change to DVSP, close paren, close quote. And DVSP means the Doherty Valley specific plan.
That's correct.
Could you tell us what the reference to no change to the Doherty Valley specific plan means?
So the Doherty Valley specific plan already identifies that as mixed use.
Mhm.
And so the Doherty Valley specific plan governs the land use development standards in the Doherty Valley specific plan. The specific plan already allows for residential development and non-residential development as a mixed use site, and allows for 40 dwelling units per acre. And so as far as the land use destination, there doesn't need to be a change to the Doherty Valley specific plan to allow for the general plan change of to mixed use residential. It still allows for mixed use residential to that site. So Doherty Valley specific plan will continue to be the development standards that we apply to the Doherty Valley mixed use site.
So with respect to parcels that were originally developed as part of the Doherty Valley specific plan that have been annexed into the city, which rules apply to land use classification and the zoning ordinance
For the Doherty Valley specific plan site,
for those areas that were part of the Doherty Valley that have been annexed into the city and are officially within the city limits of San Ramon?
the Doherty Valley specific plan would still be the development standards that we apply.
And briefly, how does one change the Doherty Valley specific plan?
Well, currently, the Doherty Valley specific plan, which was adopted or written through Contra Costa County, and then ultimately when the city incorporated, we recognize that document as the governing land use document for that area. Because any changes to the specific plan can be done through the city to the Doherty Valley specific plan. But the plan itself was written by Contra Costa County.
No, I understand that, but let me give you an example. Let's suppose the city wanted to enact a zoning ordinance for a portion of the Doherty Valley that conflicted with the Doherty Valley specific plan. Is the city prevented from enacting that ordinance?
So I'm just going to double check with Debbie here as far as where we stand with the Doherty Valley Oversight Committee on, I know that we've had some discussions as far as the specific plan.
A little bit of the legal side. So if there an amendment to the Doherty Valley plan with DVOC currently in place, as it is probably for a few more years, we're trying to dissolve it as we move through the completion of Doherty Valley. All the construction is complete for the plan itself. But if the city was to amend it based on the MOU, which is an attachment to the settlement agreement, we would have to basically coordinate or provide the opportunity for comments from the county and the town of Danville, I believe is the process for that.
Well, asking for comments is not the same thing as making a decision. So let me put a little more bluntly
We
to the
retain land
point.
use authority.
I'm sorry?
We retain land use authority.
We as in the city of San
Yes.
Ramon. So is it fair to say that given that the city of San Ramon has the jurisdictional power to change a land use designation within the city limits that formally happened to be developed through the Doherty Valley specific plan?
That is my understanding.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Good, okay. Now, see, that wasn't so hard.
Okay.
Now,
Let me make it hard because I disagree. I
okay,
read the specific plan and there was something, we could not change the zoning from high density down to low density or something like that. It's according to that, I don't know if the settlement agreement changes it, but I'd like to take another look at that because I mean, that's the key place. I'd be looking for a hillside and stuff like that out there. But I don't think you can do it. If I read that correct, it's one of the things we have in agreement. We cannot change the
That
That
could be,
direction.
that could be before we annex, right? But after we annex.
If I could add something to that, I believe the mayor's referring to the actual restriction in the specific plan on making those kinds of changes to the density. And what we're referring to here is whether or not the city has the authority to amend that specific plan. So yes, that density could be amended but only after the specific plan was amended by the city.
Okay, so now you,
Just something to look
you,
at.
no, you stored up a little hornet's nest. So when you're talking about density, are you talking about on a parcel level basis or an overall basis? Because for example, let's assume for hypothetically that we wanted to change the density for a certain part of the Doherty Valley specific land area that's part of the city from a minimum of 16 dwelling units per acre to 20. Would we have to amend the general plan to do that, or could we simply amend the city's general plan and or zoning ordinance to do that?
Well, anymore, you really don't have density decisions that are made in a vacuum because we have the no net loss provisions that that pertain to every downzoning type of action that we take. So I would say that we can't just look at those specifically and say, yes, we have blank check authority to reduce density.
As we often say, the answer is it depends. Okay, all right, enough of this legalistic stuff for the moment. Let's turn to page 4 of attachment A. And attachment, page 4 of attachment A, or at least I've handwritten 4 because some of the pages weren't numbered, but it is the page that deals with the former Coyote Creek Elementary School site, which you did mention, I think, in front of the Planning Commission the last meeting and also tonight. And my question is simply this, again, in the lower right-hand corner of the page, what's proposed for the land use designation of the center of the development is planned development. Now, as a matter of fact, hasn't that entire area been developed for housing?
Yes, that's correct.
And really, a planned development designation, both in our zoning ordinance and in our general plan, really refer to areas that are to be developed. Typically, they would be vacant space where there is sort of a master plan for doing it. That doesn't really apply to this built out area, does it?
Well, the label of planned development is what we've applied to all of Doherty Valley. Any portion that has developed or to be developed as residential. Ultimately, everything has been developed as residential as it's been expected, but planned development is the same label we've put on all of the residential designations within the Doherty Valley specific plan area.
Okay, but for this particular area, you are in fact proposing to change at least the zoning designation from public and semi-public to planned development. Wouldn't it actually be more accurate to call that area under the zoning designation medium to high density or whatever is appropriate to the density of that area?
So I'm going to also just potentially refer back to Debbie on this one, but our commitment has been that until all of Doherty Valley has been accepted and DVOC has then blessed it, we're not going to make any changes to bring it to the city's zoning designations and change our their designations to meet our zoning designations until Doherty Valley specific plan has been.
I think Ms. Chamberlain is dying to speak.
That's a great answer, Cindy. I think the other thing to add to it is the PD is appropriate because the Doherty Valley specific plan is adopted by resolution and ordinance. And so it does contain the development standards for the plan itself, which may not align with the city zoning standards, or they may be slightly different. So that in essence is its own mini general plan, essentially. So if we were to change it to a city designation, we may then have to go into amend the Doherty Valley specific plan development standards to match ours. So at this point in time, the recommendation is to take it to PD, let the plan still govern until that point in time. The city wants to go in and do changes to it on our own down the road.
Well, what it sounds like to me is that you're saying the Doherty Valley specific plan will control no matter what we want.
Well, for the time being.
Okay,
Yes, but until such as with North Community Remote, we are requesting that plan be repealed, right? Because that plan is going away. So then our general plan and the zoning districts, the Euclidean zoning will then govern that area. The San Ramon Valley specific plan is a a specific plan that does include its own zoning also. And that document governs that plan. So it's really no different than any other specific plan we have in the city.
Well, I beg to differ with you. There's a big difference. The people up on this dais can change the San Ramon Village Plan if they want. They can repeal this North Camino Ramon specific plan, which they've been asked to do. But from what you're telling me, they can't change the zoning in an area that's within the city limits of San Ramon.
No, we can. It's just, we have to, at this point in time, until we have to give the county the opportunity to comment on those changes, but we have land use authority. But to change that, to go in right now and change the PD to our city's general plan, you would then have to potentially amend the Doherty Valley specific plan concurrently to avoid the potential no net loss issue that Martin had mentioned earlier.
All right. Well, we'll get into the no less net loss rule in a second. But I guess we could write a letter to the county, to the city of Danville and the county, ask him to agree to amend the plan. The town of Danville, right. Let's turn to page 6, please, of attachment A. Okay, I'm gonna read into the record what page 6 is. Page 6 is labeled in the upper left-hand corner, city core, and it is the proposed proposed land use. And you know it because in the lower right-hand corner, the designation for Chevron Park is office. That's what's proposed. That's not the alternative. We'll get to both in a minute. Do you have that in front of you?
Yep.
All right. So basically, under this proposed zoning and land use for what used to be the North Camino Ramon specific plan plus city center and Chevron Park, you're going to leave the zoning on Chevron Park to office, correct?
That's right.
Okay, now let's assume that we did that. If we did that, could we rezone some of the areas that are now mixed use to a purely commercial designation, for example, Crow Canyon Commons, and also a portion of the Country Club Shopping Center?
So I think this goes back to the slide of city's land use authority. You can make any changes that you'd like to any of the land uses, regardless of what this map shows or what you'd like to do. We have adopted a housing element, so I would just caution that there are some mixed use sites that we would perhaps be cautious about changing them from mixed use to something else, because we've been expecting that they would meet our RENA allocation. But besides that, you have the ability to make any changes to the land use map. That's what we're presenting, both the land use map and the zoning map, to you as the recommended changes. So if there are changes that you'd like that are different than what's had been previously presented, it's completely up to you to make that change.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get is this. Crow Canyon Commons is currently zoned mixed use, which means it has the ability to be converted in whole or in part to residential. We are proposing to take the area and Country Club Shopping Center that is not a housing opportunity site and convert that from mixed use, which allows for residential development, into a retail only, which precludes residential development. So my question is, if we keep the office designation on Chevron Park, can we still do those rezonings of those two shopping centers without running afoul of the no net loss rule?
There would be enough capacity based on the other changes that we're making as part of this general plan update to absorb the changes that are being made under alternative 2, which is not making any changes to, or if you didn't want to change the Chevron and BR1 properties, there's still enough capacity if you were to change the mixed use centers that we've identified to strictly retail. Certainly there's still enough capacity because we're doing an all-in-one action and making a number of changes to a variety of places. Gelderman, we're losing, capacity, hillside residential, and in San Ramon Village specific plan, you're making changes from mixed use to now just purely commercial. So we're making all of those changes and we still will have enough capacity.
Okay, that answers that question. Now, could you turn to the next page, which is called City Core Paren Alternative Closed Paren in the upper left-hand corner. And in the lower right-hand corner, you've proposed the change that we've been talking about since at least mid-January, which is to rezone Chevron Park from office to mixed use. Now, my question is this. Let's suppose that we go ahead and rezone Chevron Park to mixed use. The day after that rezoning becomes effective, let's assume just hypothetically that Chevron Park now has a new owner named Bob. Can Bob walk in and say, you know what? I'd like to develop a corner of this building, of this property for high density housing. And I'd like to do another section. I know it's on the Central Park in the plan you've been looking at for a year, but I don't really want a Central Park. I want to put condos there. Can Bob do that if this is just zoned as mixed use and assuming that the residential component that he proposes is consistent with our objective city plan, subjective city standards?
So I would say that if the city decided to change what is our current project, that is just office, to now accepting the alternative, whether it's 2 or 3 or some other version of that, is that, and if it then became mixed use, DMU South, that as part of that change to the project, you would want to include policies with your action of amending it to DMU South, amending the project that we've presented. And once we make that direction to accept a certain alternative to the current project, that you include policies that would guide direction for DMU South or any of the retail shopping or any of the other land uses that you choose to change. You'll probably want to have some policies in place that guides the direction. But if you didn't include any policies and just said, it's DMU South now, we're not going to define, certain policies of what we'd like to see included in there, that application that Bob files will have to meet the DMU South standards and any conditions of approval and any general plan requirements, including parkland dedication ordinance, density standards that exist for DMU South that would be adopted, and in anything that, as long as they're defined as objective standards in those documents, that they can develop those through the DMU South development standards that we would put in place.
So what it sounds like is that in order to get the type of project that we've been looking at since January, what we would have to do as part of the general plan update, wouldn't it be to establish design standards for that entire property that sort of would be like a mini master plan?
I think I'm going to defer again to Debbie to address what those policies will include. They may not necessarily be as specific as design standards, but direction in the policies.
I think what we would propose to the commission at their next meeting is a draft policy that would go into the general plan that would identify, based on the concept plan that's been presented by Sunset, talking about the components, the park, the parkway surrounding the property, the buffer to Inverness Park, the density range that they're proposing, the amount of retail square footage they're proposing, the access points that they discussed. So I could see us crafting a policy around that and then proceeding through the process with them, working with them as we have in the past to develop that project. Now, the DMU South does have standards associated with it from a zoning perspective. And so those, of course, would be in play.
So it sounds like what you're proposing or will be proposing to us next meeting is to basically generate prior to any rezoning what could effectively be called a mini master plan for that area. You call it design standards or whatever, but it's in effect a master plan.
It would be direction on how the county, good gravy, old hat, direction how the city would see that parcel developing as if that was the direction of the commission, the council ultimately to move forward with it. But we would put some boundaries on based on what we have since us presented to not only the city, but also to the residents too.
And those would be enforceable.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Could you turn to the page that's number 10? I have a question on the Church of the Valley figure. Here's my question. Both the city council and the planning commission spent a number of hearings dealing with the Church of the Valley project, which at that time was an assisted care facility. And plus a school in the lower right-hand corner, yes. And the biggest, at least in our opinion, the biggest issue we had to deal with was the creek setback. And as I understand what we've been told today, is that the drawing that's appeared in all of the general plans since the one from General Plan 2020, which I confess I was there, through 2030, 2035, inaccurately showed the creeks, including the creek that flows from one culvert to another on the Church of the Valley property. My question is, when we were going through the Church of the Valley process, how come no one stumbled upon that?
Well, I think that it's been brought up a number of times, maybe not with Church of the Valley, but at least for projects that I've brought forward, like Saramone Village specific plan, we certainly did identify that there was an error that had been made with General Plan 2020 and that we were going to try to correct it. But at that time, there was not consensus to move forward with making changes to that. But we have recognized that that has been an error, except there wasn't any direction through our general plan update to make any edits to that map to correct it, at least until the 2040 plan was brought forward.
Well, I can tell you that that never came up at the Church of the Valley discussions, not at all. All right, now my last questions on attachment A have to do with the Gelderman property. First question I have is, it is correct that the Gelderman property is outside the city limits, correct?
Right.
Second question, what you've been talking about is changing the land use map designation for the Gelderman property from what it currently is, which is hillside residential, to open space. Given that the Gelderman property is outside the city limits, what is the legal enforceability or the legal effect of putting a different designation on our land use map?
So I'll start with the planning side, and then maybe I'll have a tag team with the legal side with the city attorney, at least on the planning side, because these properties, these three that have been identified as referred to as the Gelderman properties, are within the city's planning area. We do have to assign a probable land use designation to that from a when we are reviewing land use. Currently, it has a hillside residential land use that was put in place through the 2020 general plan. The change that we're proposing for General Plan 2040 is going back to what it was prior to 2020 to open space. And it's a signal of probable land use that's within our planning area. So at least in terms of what it is that we're doing, and the reason we have to do it, it's in our planning area. And so we do have to identify a land use. But on the legal side, there's probably as far as enforceability or what that means, I'll pass that on to city attorney.
Yeah, until there's an annexation, the city's zoning preference for that particular piece of property is strictly advisory to the county. It's going to be, if it's developed through the county, then there presumably it would be influential as to what the city prefers.
Okay, all right. So in terms of whether it has any binding effect on the whole, on the property owner, it does not.
Well, it may if there's at some point an annexation.
Well, yeah, if it's an annexation, then it becomes part of the city. Then, as we discussed earlier, the city has the police power right to zone it into a land use classification. But until there's an annexation, the city has no power whatsoever over the zoning or over the zoning on that area, does it? Can't enforce it.
No, not really. Although if there are, physical constraints or utility constraints, they may dictate the actual.
Right, but that's not a
jurisdiction.
city issue. That's an issue between the landowner and whoever needs to provide either the utilities or the permit to do so, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I listened to the tape of the discussion at our last meeting, and I want to ask, I think I heard Mr. Barr say that the Gelderman property had no services on it. Is that correct? Okay. In our general plan, and I'm assuming this portion isn't going to be changed, an unserviced area is basically designated for the rural conservation designation. Hillside residential is for serviced areas. Assuming that that's the case, wouldn't the proper designation for the Gelderman property, if we wanted to keep a residential use on it, the rural conservation classification?
If you wanted to keep a residential designation, you could choose any of the residential designations, including rural conservation, that does allow for residential. Open space does also allow for residential in just a different units per acre, but rural conservation is, if you wanted to allow for residential there, you could choose that instead of what's proposed as open space.
Well, if you're going to keep a designation that allowed for some residential development, wouldn't rural conservation be closer to the actual facts than hillside residential?
Well, at one point in time, I think there was an expectation that there could be urban services, which is why the urban growth boundary then was extended to allow for the future potential for extension of urban services in that area. But at this point in time, between bifurcated ownerships and the direction of the city to focus residential uses into the urban core, that's the recommendation, is to bring it back to what has traditionally been open space and still is recognized in the specific plan as open space. And because we don't expect urban services, at least in the near future, to extend up that way.
Do you know what the land use classification is of the county for that space?
So the county, there's 3 parcels. There's 2 different zonings that apply to that area. It's an A2 and an A4. A2 and A4 both allow for residential uses on agricultural uses.
Right. And when I plowed around on the county website, it seemed like those designations allowed for, as of right, at least one residential dwelling per parcel, and with a permit, you could put 2, which is sort of akin to what our rural conservation designation is. And so I guess my question is this: it sounds like the reason for going to changing it to open space, and which is obviously different than what the county has designated and doesn't allow for that type of residential use, which the county zoning does, and which our current zoning does, and rural conservation was, which you're going back 20 years to when we did the first general plan and say, well, that was open space before then, let's make it back. But let me ask you this: since the rural conservation zoning designation allows for basically a few homes in exchange for saving 80 to 90% of the property as open space, which seems to be the underlying purpose of this change. Wouldn't it be fairer to the landowner to change the designation to rural conservation, which allows them to have, if they need or want, some small development up there, but giving the city the open space it wants?
So I'm looking for the table now, but rural conservation as a zoning designation is allowed in it implements the OS designation. You'll have to give me a minute to find the right page number. But rural conservation is a zoning designation that is allowed in an OS land use.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you can do a land use designation of open space, but a zoning designation of rural conservation, and you sort of kill two birds with one stone.
You can.
Okay, all right. Do you have? Okay, attachment, I think it's, attachment C is the entire general plan. I'm not going to ask you to go through that, but I do have a question that came up at the planning commission meeting last time. And it had to do with the limit on non-retail development in shopping centers. Because as you pointed out in your dissertation tonight, I believe, at least was the planning commission, that there is part of the general plan update, it would be to eliminate the 25% maximum on non-retail use in shopping centers in favor of a, well, let's look at it type of issue. Here's my question. If we adopt the language in the general plan that you propose, does the language in the zoning ordinance that places a 25% cap on non-retail use in a shopping center remain in effect?
Correct. That's not we are not proposing it as part of this project, changes to the zoning ordinance that relate to the non-retail limits and percentage.
Okay.
That will be what we expect is that will be part of a later zoning ordinance update that will trail this general plan update.
Okay, so if we adopt the general plan amendment that you're proposing, and the day after the ink is dry on that general plan amendment, and Bob comes in and wants to turn 30% of his shopping center into kiddie daycare, then he would still be subject to meeting the requirements of the current zoning ordinance, which requires a factual justification for exceeding the 25% cap.
Bob, Sally,
Yeah, we're beating up Bob today.
Sally.
All right. All right. Last question at this point in the proceeding, and that has to do with what we have talked about in planning commission meetings forever, which is this is the policy in the general plan to have 6.5 acres of parks per 1,000 residents. And as was pointed out in the proposed general plan, at proposed build out, if all the parks that we want to build are built, such as Henry Park, we would have 6 acres of parks for every 1,000 residents. And so my question is that, did staff consider, given those numbers, to recommend reducing the policy, which is not a requirement, it's a policy, it's a goal in the general plan, from 6.5 acres down to 6?
We did consider that, and that was something that we've discussed with the Parks Commission and internally as staff. And we opted to keep the 6.5 goal in the policy document as an opportunity to open up in the future if there are park lands that have not been contemplated as part of this land use. And as more developers pursue development in the city and have to meet their parkland dedication ordinance, that it still provides an opportunity to create additional acreage through that development review process and include additional parks to try to get us as close to the 6.5 as a way to encourage future development to help us get towards meeting our goal. And so while we did look at the fact that at general plan build out, we could meet 6. We'd like to continue to forward with the 6.5 goal as a signal to how else can we get more parkland through our development process.
Well, did it occur to you that maybe one way to look at this would be if we set a goal at 6 and we hit 6.2, we've exceeded our goal. Look what a great job we've done.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mark, you have any questions? We should start thinking about opening the public hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, Cindy, thank you for the presentation. Don't we have some areas of the city that city's planning area that are not covered by a specific plan, right?
There are.
And don't we also have a desire to align our general plan with our specific plans? There should be a general alignment there, and there shouldn't be a kind of a discontinuity.
Yes, I will say that state law has changed a lot over the years. And so as much as have always tried to intend for the specific plans to match our general plans, it hasn't always been the case, but it's certainly something that we have to make sure that they are much closer to in alignment now, because state law has changed so much that if one or the other says something different, you could potentially follow the plan that's more advantageous to that, property owner. So
So maybe
in
not
the
a hard
past-
requirement, but certainly a desired effect
that's
is
right.
to have that alignment.
In the past, we've tried to align as much as possible, but because different updates and things kind of trail one, sometimes your general plan is updated and then that necessitates an update to the specific plan. So they're not always going to be 100% in alignment unless we're doing things like we are with this project, where we're repealing one, we're updating another specific plan, and also changing the land use concurrently to try to prevent things like
Yeah.
inconsistencies.
So, I mean, I see that we're trying to make some updates to the San Ramon Village specific plan as part of this general plan update. So I guess my question is, when I take a look at the West Side specific plan, it's a 1997 plan. It's largely completed from my perspective anyway. Taking a look at what it required, that 1997 plan doesn't look anything like what the current on the ground what's actually there now. If you look at the drawings, and it looks like it's largely built out with the exception of maybe the laborer's property. At what point do we make a decision it's time to just eliminate that specific plan and just incorporate that area as one of those non-specified areas of the general plan?
Yeah, I think process like this is where we take that feedback and we move that into, our next work plan that planning may need to consider. It's very similar to the last time we updated General Plan 2035 and we looked at economic element updates. And then that was a signal, hey, we have to update the San Ramon Village specific plan, or what used to be the Croquet specific plan, and then we have to amend it. And so, when we're evaluating land use and policies like we are doing now, if there's direction about how we might want to look at next steps for updates, and West Side Plan is one of those things that you'd like us to take another look at. Certainly, if you indicate that through this process, we'll evaluate it.
Well, I think at some point we need to do that. We ran into this when we were looking at the El Nido property, right? There was a disconnect between the specific plan and the general plan, so we had to do an amendment. But as I understood it, there was some thought back whenever, I guess it was the last general plan update, that, okay, well, we're just going to leave that West Side specific plan alone, and we'll deal with it with any issues when they arise through a development application. But I'm just thinking maybe at some point we ought to do that alignment, so we don't have to wait till a development application in order to make that amendment change, and we all have to come back to the table again.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. As you know, the West Side Plan, as far as what the vision was, for the most part, the majority of the plan has already been implemented. And so even though it still continues to exist, because most of it's been implemented, we don't regularly deal with having to tell developers what to do because it's already been done. But there are some issues with the specific plan as far as how it relates to state law, things like having a residential unit cap or things that we probably no longer able to enforce. And so there is an opportunity to update that plan. It just wasn't as part of this work program, but it certainly could be another effort.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other question. I may have some comments after the public hearing.
Hey, Scott, then Sridhar.
Sure. I have some notes that I'll pass on to you that
Your disease.
places where I think we can make the general plan a little better. But one I mentioned to you before, on page 87, it's implementing policy 3.2-I-3, require new development to fund public facilities and infrastructure as applicable to mitigate the impact of that development. As you're probably aware, I sit on the board of directors and the finance committee for the East Bay Regional Communication System Authority, which is the radio system used by all the first responders in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We have 21,000 radios on our system. And fortunately, when the Faria development was going in, when Lennar bought the building rights and started building up there, there was a clause in our conditions of approval that required that they either verify that the radio coverage in that area was sufficient, met our standards, eBrick standards, or they had to install a new radio tower to ensure coverage. I would ask that we include in the text below 3.2.I or -I-3, we include mention of the eBricks radio system. We encountered, so when they did that, they found that they had a hole up there. They did not have sufficient coverage for police and fire. So they're putting a tower up on the hills. It's called Wiedemann Hill up there. That will take care of that, which actually also improves the coverage up Bollinger towards Little Hills and Las Trampas, fortunately. It should also include a statement that their development does not impact in a negative way the existing radio system. I'll give you an example. There's a new parking structure being built at the East Dublin BART station. And it turns out that new parking structure is high enough that it actually blocks the microwave signal from an adjacent microwave antenna to a farther microwave antenna. So they're going to have to move that microwave antenna in order to restore that microwave link. In Antioch, there is a hole in their radio coverage called Walton Lane. And the city of Antioch, which is in not very good financial situation, is responsible for the site and paying lease costs on that site because they didn't join eBricks when it was founded. And so what I don't want to have happen is that a future development, whether it be in the core or someplace else, doesn't have good radio coverage because eBricks will require that the city provide that radio coverage well, Ebrix says we don't care. It's either the developer or the city, but Ebrix is not building any new radio facilities for their, it's incumbent upon the city, the jurisdiction, or the developer. And so it just seemed to me that that was a good place to add into that text. The text refers primarily to community facilities district, but development to fund public facilities and infrastructure is right up the line with a radio, emergency radio coverage. The other place it could go is on page 185 in 7-7, 7.7-I-3, which is police. Require a new development if appropriate to provide a funding mechanism to support and maintain San Ramon's high level of police services, such as community facilities district. You could put it there as well, but don't really care. But I don't want to see this document go to press without, I want developers to know that they're responsible for that. And if all it means is that they hire a company to go out and take some radio surveys of the area and present that to the city and to the Ebrix staff, good. It's not unlike getting a geotechnical engineer to say, yeah, you don't have an earthquake fault going through the middle of that house. They have to provide that. That's not incumbent upon the city. That's incumbent upon the developer. I'm very grateful to see the mixed use policy there near the back. That's on page 323, that there's the mixed use designation with the commercial emphasis and the mixed use development with the residential. And so it's our job to put the right one on the right parcel. But I think that does a pretty good job of dealing with FAR and densities and things like that. But yet it's an objective standard, which is the one we're fighting for. Gosh, objective standards are going to be the key going forward. And because, we're seeing, what is it, SB 35 getting Dave is getting a big boost, pushing it out to what, 2035 or something like that. It was supposed to expire in about 3 or 4 years. Well, it wouldn't surprise me a bit to see SB 330 get an extension into the distant future. So we have to be in a position to deal with those things. So that's my comment, is making sure we somehow require that any development take care of our radio system.
You have any questions, Sridhar or Marisol?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Cindy, for presentation. I'll start with our overall plan update. So let me start with the community engagement. Thanks for sharing all the engagements that you've done through packet page 6. It clearly mentions. But one thing I would like to see is it possible for us to publish a glance at this general plan, similar to what we do with our budget plan, where we have a brochure so that, right now it is like around 350 pages general plan and around 735 pages for EIR. So I don't think community can really go through all that, as we don't have options, so we had to go through. But is it possible for us to publish something like that?
Sort of a general plan cheat sheet.
Something like that, so we can share that. Yeah. So that's one. And the second one I have is within the community engagement itself about whenever I ask the community members about the RENA, pretty much as of now, at least, I didn't receive any response, positive response. Nobody knows. You are trying your best. I know you did so many workshops and all those things. I'm taking RENA as an example, right? Because that's where the question comes from community, why we are building so much, what's going on here, right? So is it possible to explore that we can do some neighborhood meetings so that we can go to the neighborhoods and have meetings instead of we expecting people to come to us? We need to explore that option. I know our city manager Svedowski did a great job in creating that video. which you published, but getting people to that video itself is challenging. So I want to see if we can explore that as part of our community engagement piece. The next one I have is about economic development. On packet page 66, it says, as a key quality of life amenity for both residents and employees, retail is a critical factor for successful economic development. Now, when I look at Doughty Valley, I think we are far from this goal. So especially Windermere. Windermere got around 8,500 residents with one Walgreens drugstore. And if you see overall, so there is an option for village center that was already designated for commercial space. For last 4 years, at least, I keep hearing that the Doughty Valley Oversight Committee will be gone and we will be working on that. But so far, just today, I heard it is going to be still there for next 2 years. That's a surprise for me, for sure. So definitely, I want to see that we need to put some emphasis on that. I want to see that goal to be added, especially if you see on retail performance guidelines on packet page 81. There is no performance guidelines or objectives for retail. So I think we need to update that one. So yeah, definitely I have a major concern about getting that village center built for Doughty Valley. But otherwise, pretty much all that community is right now either going to Dublin or they're driving towards like on the road, right? So that's again going to hit our environmental sustainability, whether we want to reduce the vehicle miles travel as well as greenhouse GHG emissions. So if we want to attack those two things, then better we focus on this retail in Doughty Valley.
I think the difficulty is that the land use plan in Doughty Valley is, for the most part, was set with the Doughty Valley specific plan, and now that the city has become has annexed that property, that land use plan has gone into effect, with the exception of the village center within the Doughty Valley specific plan. There are no other land use amendments for commercial or non-residential spaces. So unless we actually change any of the existing land uses to be either commercial or something that supports more retail, it's going to be difficult unless we make a change to the map, or if there's some suggested areas that we're making that change to that part of the city. That's the difficulty of sometimes inheriting areas, is that the area doesn't always look like the way that maybe the city would have planned for it. But unless there are changes to land uses that you're suggesting in the Doughty Valley.
At least we should look at the one which we already have it, right? Village center. Why not that one? If I remember right, it should allow us 680,000 square feet of commercial space. So that's a pretty good space. And
it does.
Yeah. When I moved in 2005, that's when I heard that it is going to come up. But so far, nothing happened on that.
Yeah. It is privately owned, but the other thing to consider is that it is also designated as mixed use, which also has some implications too, as far as state law and what you can and can't allow in mixed use, or if you have a preference for retail or some other land use other than residential. Sometimes it can be difficult. State law makes it somewhat difficult for us to, even if we really want to encourage retail there, sometimes that choice is not a city's. We don't always have that option to make that choice.
And Cindy, if I can add to that, that's the one power that I wish we had as local government, is saying, you shall put an Olive Garden there, or you shall open a restaurant in this location. It is, largely up to private development. We've had starts and stops with reaching out to certain businesses where they were interested, and for whatever reason, economic reason, or their calculations as to what would be successful there, it just didn't work out. So we do reach out to certain businesses. I could say the difficulty with that location is it is so far off the freeway. Most retail want to be, what you call the retail gravity towards the freeway. That's why you see something like, if you've been to Blackhawk Plaza lately, there's a lot of vacant storefronts because it is so far off the beaten path. It's just difficult to open up businesses there. So we have it zoned and we do everything that we can to encourage people to look at that site. We just haven't really had anybody bite at that location. So we're constantly doing what we can in terms of zoning and outreach. It's just it is very frustrating that we can't do a bit more to get somebody in that site.
Is it, thanks for following up on that, but is it possible to share that information with the community that what work we have done so far and where we stand on that and why we are not able to get the traction from retail business, so that I want to make sure we have some transparency with our community.
Sure.
When we are saying on one side that when I see on the page, packet page, what is this number, where it clearly says there is a huge requirement for retail.
Yeah.
And on the other side, we are saying that we don't have available, like nobody is ready to build a retail there.
Right.
So while community was communicated when they were buying the homes there, that there will be a village center coming up, right?
Yeah.
So let's make sure that we share all the updates that we are receiving with the community, just to make sure they are aware of it, so we keep transparent.
Sure, we can look at additional messaging.
Okay, that will be great. Thank you. And then the next one is about housing. On the housing, the current policy, we still, I was looking at the overall page, except for one at the packet page 303, which mentions about homeless. That's pretty much. We don't have anywhere, I didn't see anywhere which mentions about how we are going to address that or prepare ready for homeless issues.
The packet that you have doesn't include the housing element. So chapter 11, that was provided as part of our housing element update back in January. In that chapter, it does have a discussion of different need groups, including unhoused and homeless population.
So we can get that info from a housing element
Correct.
document in this one. So is it possible to add that info here so we can have within general plans? So if someone refer,
Yeah.
be able to get it.
At the very end of this whole process, we will combine all of the chapters and make it one overall document. But what we're presenting tonight is just the edits to the remainder of the general plan document that we're proposing changes to.
Sounds good. And then are we still with the 15% as our standard for affordable housing for development, or are we changing anything on that?
It's a good segue to future items coming before the City Council and Planning Commission. The city does have an inclusionary housing ordinance. The ordinance does require a 15% obligation for multifamily residential development. It currently is a 10% for single family development, which is in process of being introduced, changes to that ordinance to match the multifamily. So you will be seeing that actually at your next city council meeting, an update to the inclusionary ordinance that will apply the 15% must build standard to all residential developments that have more than 10 units.
Sounds good. And I'm getting there. And my next question is regarding the public services on this one. On packet page 48, you mentioned that San Ramon specific plans, 5.2 schools, no need for schools. But then packet page 175, you say projected school enrollment is going to be like, there is a huge increase requirement for additional schools. So I just want to understand, is it, if we are going with San Ramon specific plans, so did we already figured out which schools it is going to serve? That's why we don't need any schools for that specific plan?
If you could just give me the
Oh, packet
page numbers
page
again.
48.
48. So 48 is within. the
San Ramon
San Ramon
specific
Village
plans,
specific plan.
5.2.
Correct.
So it says no need for schools.
So I would say in general, in whether it's San Ramon Village specific plan or other portions of the city, as far as capacity, school capacity, our existing schools have capacity to, based on our conversations with the school district, that the existing schools have capacity to accommodate the city's future build out growth. So there would be no need for an additional school based on our new build out population in 2040.
Okay, but then packet page 175 says different.
Projected school enrollment, the section
Yes.
there.
That's right. It says there could be potentially add an estimated 2,556 kindergarten to 5th grade students, 1,669 6th grade to 8th grade students, 2,610 high school students to San Ramon Valley School Unified District. So it says that the district can accommodate potential increase so that they need to either add more schools or they need to add additional capacity to it.
So I would say that the city would defer to the school district ultimately on how they accommodate their capacity needs. At least from the conversations that we've had with them, is that based on future enrollment with the build out population through updating of schools or increasing capacity at existing schools, they don't anticipate a need to add more school sites in the city's planning area. Potentially the school district's direction may change, their policy direction may change, where they feel that they might need one depending on what future development comes through, and they may change their minds, but ultimately based on our projection and what the school district has said, that they have the ability to manage new population through various means that they have available to them.
Sounds good. So we are we work with them pretty closely about this one, right?
Yes.
Because that's one of the regular question we receive from community. Okay, you're building out, where is the schools, where is water coming, right? So it's good to know that we are working pretty close with them. And okay, the next one I have is regarding on disaster preparedness. So on packet page 83, it says flood control. And it says new development will provide adequate storm drain facilities. I see about the new development, but how about the existing one that, for example, we had that problem near our senior community center, right? So what about the existing? Do we have any plans for that flood control?
So the city does have a flood maintenance and store through our public works department does manage a variety of different flood programs, whether that's clearing creeks to make sure that there's more capacity or cleanup, or other things that would reduce stormwater flow, or in the event of flood, that there is a response to how those policies then get implemented. So that applies to both existing and new developments. The policy that is included in the general plan is just a signal that for any new development that's coming in, they also have to incorporate as part of their design standards that we have in place in our public works standards that would apply to those projects.
Okay. Okay, that I'll go to the next one is on the safety elements. So as you know, we are pretty our San Ramon is pretty close or proximity with earthquake, right? So I see that we do have alert systems with Nixel alerts, like text messages. But, from recent Moy fire incidents, and that whole concept of alerting is changed, right? So people may see the text messages or not when this disaster happens. Actually, the cell may not even work when this disaster happens, because if cell towers goes down or something, right? So is that something that we need to look at updating our emergency response for alerting the community?
It may be more appropriate in a different document than at least the general plan. I know that there are other policies that the city enforces through our police department that works in collaboration with fire department and how we get emergency services provided to our residents in those situations. The general plan just gives the direction of needing to be able to respond when there is an emergency, and then how we actually implement that is kind of the direction of the various partners that we have with police and fire and other agencies that would respond in those situations.
So you're saying that as a city, we don't have any role on what system we want to choose to alert our residents when incident happens?
Not in the general plan.
No,
but maybe-
in the general plan, it was state, general emergency preparedness. And then in other, our EOC documents, we have more details about how we would go and alert residents, should the cell towers go down. I believe we still have the AM station up and running. I'm not sure. I haven't checked my AM radio in a long time. But if it is a localized emergency, we will even go to the level of having the Bearcat out there and somebody with a bullhorn, or knocking on doors. If it's what we did with the flooding this year, when there was a second chance of flooding, we were literally knocking on doors, making sure people knew what was happening. Yes, we have Nixle. Not everybody subscribes to Nixle or has a cell phone. We ask, that if you have relatives or friends that are even out of the area, to subscribe to alerts so you can call loved ones. So there are various tools that we use and that we look into for emergency response outside of cell towers.
Yeah,
It's just not specifically in the general plan, everything that we use.
Oh, okay. So I think at least for alert system, that became national news, right? So it is very critical for residents, and we are getting questions from community that what are the procedures we are using. So if possible, let's add that as part of this plan, just to make sure people get alerted when these things happen. I mean, when incidents happen. Well, last couple of them, or three of them, sorry. One thing about this park and ride regarding the transportation. Pre-COVID, we had a lot of challenges where people were struggling to get parking in park and ride. So it will be great if we can see something on the transportation side, if we can enhance that as part of our goal. And then the other one is definitely about whatever the work we are doing. I was trying to figure out, like, from last 4 years or 5 years, how did we do with our general plan? How did we, can we measure? Let's say, for example, this was a population, this was the services that we wanted to build. But today, if I want to go and measure, I couldn't find out. Maybe I don't know how to do it, but if there is some way I can measure, that will be great. Or if we can have some monitoring or measuring tools, that will be great.
They provide an annual report to us, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So chapter 1 does state that after implementation, after adoption, there's various things that we do to keep you informed of how we implement the general plan. And that includes things like an annual report on housing, as well as general plan implementation of the policies. So that does come in the form of a report annually to the Planning Commission and City Council on different measures that we've taken over the last year to implementing those general plan policies.
So if I want to, today, if I want to check the performance of our general plan, let's say from 2010 to 23, can I measure that? Did we achieve that or not? Where we stand? Is that possible?
Yeah, we we do it based on the annual report, so on an annual basis. And so every time we do our next update, that resets the general plan document. So our next year's update will based on all of the current policies that we adopt now, and then how well we've implemented it over the course of however much time has passed since. So you'll see in the report things like we previously had like CIPs or transportation improvements, and you'll see in the report that actually says this year we did this roadway expansion or this, modification or updates in response to the policies that were created.
Okay, so we can get the annual, and can we publish that on our website, cities? Is it published on website?
Part of the minutes of a meeting.
Oh, I would rather publish on the website, because I expect the community don't go through the meeting minutes of our every council meeting, so it will be easy for them to go. When they request us, it is easy for us to guide them. Just go to that site and get the information. That will be great. That's pretty much my questions. Thank you.
Marisol, you have any questions, or you want to make the motion? We got some public that want to speak.
So I was just, the first question kind of an so basically what I'm thinking the alternative to is that it's going to provide more diversified layout that will be provided by the development of residential, commercial, as well as. I'm sorry. Thank you. So what I'm saying is that basically what I'm seeing through alternative plan 2 is that it's going to provide a more diversified layout, better balance as a result between retail, commercial, and residential housing, right? And thereby providing a better balance as we build out between, sort of the economic side, as well as making sure there's a balance with residential, but also increasing walkability and access to parks is what I'm seeing as a general.
Yes.
Was a goal here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And one of the things I'm wondering, is there any way, I know we were just talking about how limited we are, but who we can attract, but any way we can kind of vie in those commercial areas for companies that better align with the really the workforce we have here in San Ramon. Pre-COVID, unfortunately, that's the only numbers that exist right now. We had about 73% of those working in San Ramon that were commuting, and almost close on average about 38 minutes each way to work. And about 40% of those were commuting over about 45 minutes each way to work. Really long commute times, and we don't have public transportation along the 680 corridor. So I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can attract vie for companies and that will align with some of the workforce that we have here in San Ramon?
A couple of policies come to mind in the economic element update. Things like telecom and expanding telecom infrastructure. I know that's one of the policies in the economic development element that can support jobs and other commercial uses that can see that as a benefit to wanting to locate here. We also have other incentives that we've that are built into the general plan in land use through development standards to attract more of the types of land uses or the types of uses that we want in the existing areas. So we have those general policies that throughout the general plan document that try to encourage stronger connection with our education community, of the community college, increasing opportunities for transportation demand management to increase offerings within our office park to attract businesses. So those are some of the policies. Now, how we implement that goes through our normal day-to-day services that the city provides, and we rely on our transportation planners and our public works department to help with the implementation of that. So things like fiber and the improvements that you're seeing on the roadways, the library support that we provide at Doherty Station, things like that is what we're doing to try to better provide a place where it attracts for businesses. But I don't know if you think it potentially goes far enough. Maybe Stephen can talk about some.
Yeah, and what Cindy's addressing is the tools that we're using to make San Ramon a great place to conduct business. But then there's another layer of the promotional aspect of it. How do we promote San Ramon? And that's always been the question is we're a bit of a hidden gem that we're trying to unhide and make sure people know that this is a great place to do business, to locate families, the amenities in the area. We do work with the chamber, and we're working with other organizations to figure out how we can conduct more promotion for the city. We participate in Innovation Tri-Valley and groups like that that are trying to really promote the Tri-Valley as a great place to live. Unfortunately, with major corporations, to land them, it's usually comes down to where does the CEO want to live and commute to. There was a major company that it escapes my memory at this time that moved to Dublin, and they made the news because the CEO still chose to live in Palo Alto, and he was the one commuting, and he moved the company to give his employees a closer commute. So it's trying to crack that culture and to promote San Ramon as a great place to do business. And I think with what's happening with the city core, I was discussing this with somebody today. I can't name a place in Northern California, if not the state, that has the setup that we're implementing of the density of housing right next to businesses, right next to Central Park, Iron Horse Trail. So getting that word out that all of these amenities are here and are coming, that's going to be the challenge over the next few years. And hopefully we'll get the businesses to move in and help reduce those commutes as much as we can.
Yeah. It would definitely improve, reduce traffic and improve quality of life for our commuters, right? And then the other question, just same, kind of similar because it's the same thing we were, Councilmember Burrows was kind of mentioning, but so we can't control who comes, but to these, some of the, over there in the Doherty Valley. But again, is there any way we can attract, businesses that would provide convenience, products, things where people regularly frequent to go shop for everyday things, so that people don't have to drive all the way to the downtown core, to be able to buy, a snack or food or go to a little restaurant or something like that. And also there's, the area just across right there on Bollinger on the west side of Bollinger and intersection of Crow Canyon. I mean, yeah, Doherty. No, that is Doherty Valley, Doherty Road, right there, Bollinger and Doherty Road.
So Gale Ranch
Safeway
Plaza?
across the street from that could that be potentially an area we could look into bringing some more kind of convenience stores?
Oh, the vacant areas right now in that
Yeah.
shopping area.
Are we talking about the Gale Ranch Shopping Center or a parcel across the street from there?
Across from the Safeway, where we have all of those stores right there in Safeway.
Uh-huh.
But if you were to cross the street across Bollinger to
Okay.
the other side. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
Is
that's
there any
actually
area there?
detention basin.
Oh, there's no space we can build in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to think. if we
Yeah,
could-
the available, and that's the story of San Ramon is we have very limited areas to expand retail, and in particular in areas where it would be close to the freeway with visibility and the higher chances of a service opening. And we're also, in a phase where we're coming out of COVID, or you can debate if we're out of COVID or not, and retail habits are changing, and there's a lot going on that we need to consider with with shopping habits and services that people want. So we'll be bringing more of that back to both bodies throughout the next year or so. Just a shift in how we need to think of our shopping centers and how people are shopping and the current trends.
Yeah, convenience is huge.
Yep.
And attracting people to San Ramon too, right? Quick, and then the last question I had is just, I'm assuming, of course, if you could just describe for me what, how it was, evacuation plans were kind of incorporated into the layout of things. Cause I did see that, I think that it was nice, like, for example, in that one, on the Gelderman properties, kind of just sort of closing, instead of having that awkward hillside residential there, kind of putting that together and keeping it as an open space. I think that's a good idea. But like, what are, in terms of like evacuation, how were evacuation plans considered into the mapping out of some of these ideas that you put in place?
Yeah, so actually, one of the changes to state law has been that the city does actually have to evaluate our emergency operations and escape routes. And so there are policies that have been introduced in Chapter 9 of the safety element. So Figure 9-2 includes a figure of so that we've evaluated where residential developments have limited evacuation routes, and then there are policies that then speak to how we can reduce the impacts of emergency response in times of emergency to those areas. So you'll find that in the safety element.
Okay, yeah, because it's really, I think that after some of the wildfires that we had and we saw what happened, there was these severe bottlenecks. We want to make sure that, given that we have this open space adjacent to us, right? We have a way to safely get our residents out in the event of a wildfire, for example, or sudden slides. Thank you.
Well, I just want to remind you, we do need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion, Perkins, second Rubio. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then let's, okay, let me read this. There are speaker cards in the back if you haven't filled it out already. Or if you want to, for the people on Zoom, please use your raise your hand feature, dial *9 on your phone. You will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Okay, let's take the speaker cards first.
Brent Smith.
Yes, please. Yeah, we want to hear you.
Need the mic, but so I'm Brent. I'm a member of the Harlan Gelderman family. So I'm here to basically kind of address what Mr. Wallace actually touched on a little earlier about your redesignation of open space from the urban growth boundary. And I mean, we've been here over 150 years, 175 years, all that stuff, right? Ownership's never changed, been there forever, yada, yada. It's never been designated as open space ever, other than maybe in San Ramon's general plan. So at the very least, I'd like to just formally request that we don't designate it as open space, mainly to mislead or misconstrue anyone else that's reading or wants to know what the land is, what it could possibly be used for, and so forth. I'm not here to advocate a major development of any kind, just basically try to keep it as either rural housing or what it is at ag, right? A2 or A4. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Taiwan's the country.
Hi, everyone. Number one, general plan draft has yet to be reviewed and input provided by the Architectural Review Board for standards and building code revision portion of the general plan. Not sure which 18 city committees and commissions were given input opportunity. Per staff report, packet page 4, please kindly disclose in future staff report. Number 2, creek setback regulations deleted per packet page number 8 is worrisome. Staff report should provide mediation clause that Mr. Barr explicated to me earlier in private that creek regulation ordinance is built in to be resurrected should development take place near creeks after GP revision. Number 3, city's legal authority for land use discretion power based on California Constitution, Article 11, Chapter 7, stated on packet page number 9, must also include privilege or include private owners' rights to ignore revised zoning power. Sorry, I lost it. Zoning power until the property title is transferred or sold per Mr. Barr. Please correct me if I misunderstood. Staff has fiduciary duty to oblige to homeowner rights and to minimize litigation risks that can be eliminated if thorough disclosure can be carefully considered and provided in the first place. Frivolous Doherty Valley specific plan amendment or revision will invite litigation as their open space is dictated by Windermere government governing documents issued issued to homeowners by developers. Number 4, California court should not be regarded as deferential to the police power of cities per the staff report on packet page number 10, or we as a city can ignore the affordable housing legislations crammed down our throats by alien jurisdictions such as Gavin Newsom or Scott Wiener. Number 5, gratitude to Councilmember Perkins for minding the cell towers by requesting for that to be radio towers, whatever you were talking about, the radio wavelength, to make sure that developers pay for it and not me. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Gary Shaban.
Hi, Garrett.
Mr. Mayor, Chair, all you really hardworking people. I want to speak to a comment that you made. And that is with regards to what to do with office buildings and citizens in San Ramon, the workers here. Things are happening now where people are getting called back, the workers are getting called back to the office part of the time, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And they're finding as they're getting out of their homes, these are the people I'm talking to in our neighborhoods, that their spouses are pretty glad that they're getting out. And okay. I think some of these buildings in San Ramon, these office buildings, need to be developed into very high-tech institutions where they can go and use them on a per hour basis or a leased basis or somehow something other than Workday, because that hasn't been working out too well. But someplace that's so dynamic that these people who work in these dynamic environments will go there and use those facilities on their days that they're having to go in or having to be at home and getting into work. I think there's a lot of room for that to be developed. I think it's what's happening today. Everyone's using their phones, their tablets and what have you to do their work. Give them a good place in San Ramon so they don't have to commute to be able to do their work. Someplace they can just step into and be able to use. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Joel Redmond.
Hello, my name is Joel Rittman. I'm the senior pastor at Church of the Valley. And so thank you guys. It was great to hear a lot of your comments and the thoroughness of how you're taking your jobs. I have really just 3 comments. One is that we welcome COB being part of the housing element. We see that, I see that as pastor, as a great opportunity for the church to become part of the community in a bigger way. And also, I want to say that we welcome the 100-foot setback being taken away. But at the same time, unfortunately, the person left. We understand that we will have obligations to the state, wildlife, and all that. So we're not free to do whatever we want to do, that there's jurisdictions that oversee what we do. So we get that. But what I really want to talk about is the density on the site. Our view is to do workforce housing, and the council member really hit something that is on our heart, which is that we have a lot of city workers that are leaving this area. And density is important. But I do hear the vice chair last meeting, I sat here and listened, about the concern that we will get a higher density and then we'll go to the state bonus and get more than what you ever wanted on that site. And so I guess my ask is that we sit down and figure out where a win-win is, because we really do want it to be financially viable, and it will not be at 15 units a unit, an acre. And so we want to find that ground. I'm willing to commit to no higher cap. We will be reasonable, but I do believe workforce housing is our focus. We're not trying to get subsidized housing. We aren't trying to get high market. We really want to hit what's being underserved. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
John Saffrey.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share about my view about the open space proposal. I'm one of the landowners of the government property that I purchased in 2019. My APN is published in the general plan change to be an open space. My only concern is it impacts the value of the property. It's my life savings that I worked hard in the city of San Ramon for 20 years, and I purchased this property. If you could leave it as a hillside residential, it will be of great value. That's all, Mike.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
That was the last speaker card I have. You do not have any hands raised on Zoom, and we did receive 2 written comments on this item.
Okay, we have those in front of us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand that. Now, as far as the public hearing for the council, we
close the public hearing.
I'll second.
motion Perkins, second Rubio. Any further discussion for the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, I have a question for the city attorney. Okay, the next part is for the commission. Do I turn this over to the chair or just keep right on rolling?
Yes, if you will, that way we can have the commission, I believe there.
Do you see how fast I
Yes,
did? There's a lesson there.
Okay. All right, commissioners, we now have the floor to have a discussion. So we can either raise hands or start talking, or I can start at one end of the dais here and work our way back. I think that was cute. That was cute.
I'm sorry,
I think
through the chair.
Yeah,
If I could just give a little direction on this, what we're focusing on at this point before we get into everyone's final comments would be the public hearing. The council has just closed their part of the public hearing, and now the commission has the option of continuing the public hearing to a date certain.
What do you want to do? Is it October 17? We want to fly? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to continue the public hearing on the general plan update to October 17th.
So move.
I forward the motion. Okay, the motion has been made to continue our public hearing to October 17. We have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I hear none. Okay.
Okay. I get it back. I got the hammer. Okay, I guess we have to do a public comment tonight, correct? I didn't see it on there either, that or I bypassed it. No, that was public hearing. Now I'm talking about public comment. Right. Okay. Then let's bypass them. All right, well, is there any further discussion that you want to talk about tonight on, seeing no one, let me just say then. So, go ahead.
I think everybody probably wants final discussion. No.
Right, so let me do it. I suggest we do it this way. We allow the commissioners to have a discussion of the topics we covered tonight on the general plan update. We'll finish, then the council can do what they want to do. Does that work?
Yes.
Works. All right, commissioners. Whoever wants to go first. So I don't have to pick.
I'll go ahead and start. We, at our last meeting, spent probably 3 hours of our meeting discussing all of these topics. And I think from my perspective, all of our points were integrated in the staff report tonight and or the presentation from Cindy, as well as the documents. And I didn't see anything that wasn't in full alignment of what we talked about on, at our last meeting. Specifically, we talked about Church of the Valley, we talked about Gelderman property, we talked about retail, urban creeks, the San Ramon Village specific plan, as well as the city core. And I think we touched all those topics pretty thoroughly last meeting, and nothing changed in my opinion tonight.
I had one comment, follow-up comment on Councilman Moreau's question about school districts accommodating all these, new families. And I don't feel the answer I got was satisfying, because let's say that the San Ramon Valley Unified School District says, yes, we can accommodate. Is there a way to ensure that? Because that could lead to a disaster if we have 2,000 families coming in and we cannot accommodate these kids because we sort of took their answer and there was no way to verify that if it was actually possible to provide education for these kids. I understand that we have an open communication, but is there an independent party that comes in and says, you know what, we've looked at it, it makes sense that what they're saying is true, and it's a satisfactory answer.
You want
If she wants to come, well, it's not, I would love to, yeah, why not? Is there some, she's not supposed to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, if I can just address that.
Sure.
The general plan does evaluate as far as our general plan build out and what the expected school population is going to be. And so there's a number that we look at as far as what impacts the new land uses will have as far as enrollment. But separate from that, with every new development project that is proposed in the city, we do, as part of that process, do a development review that engages the school district and requires, as part of this process, a determination from the school district on how school capacity will be impacted by that project and what is the measures in which that project can meet that, whether that's payment of impact fees or potentially expansion using or additional school sites that may be necessary to accommodate that new development growth. But essentially every project that then comes forward to the city is subject to the Development Review Committee and conditions of approval and impact fees.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for all the information today and for other meetings. I do agree with that we have seen this multiple times and I have not seen changes, although I would like to say that I do agree with Councilman Veros that it would be good to have some type of metrics on our dashboard a dashboard of metrics on our website that people could see. I know it's something that I've talked to staff about in terms of how do we know we are successful. So that would be something that I think would be something that the city should look at so that people will know that the work that's being put in by the staff and the city and all the employees that work here is paying off and getting to our outcomes that we're looking at. So I think that's a great suggestion that we look at.
Thank you. I just want to share again, as we're putting the final touches on this, that the one thing that is not in anywhere in this general plan is reference to the walking district. And I want to continue to raise this topic so that people don't forget that as we are promoting the city core as our premier walking, biking district, that unless we put into on print and in our ordinances and so forth, the size of the sidewalks and the amenities such as that, then we will be asking people to put in reasonably wide sidewalks and hoping that they agree to that instead of saying, no, in the walking district, the sidewalks have to be at least 8 feet wide. And I was in city center today taking in, I wish I had my tape measure, how wide the sidewalks are. To that point that any place you go where people are walking cheerfully, the sidewalks are quite wide. There's a correlation and I don't see any of that in our general plan. So I would like to spur that reminder before the moment passes forever lost or somewhat lost. And I haven't forgot about the bee ordinance either, Commissioner or Councilman Armstrong. Let's hear it for the bees.
No.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. With respect to the schools, one of the disclaimers we usually put in either a staff report or conditions of approval is that by state law, neither the planning commission or the city council can dictate what schools are built in the city of San Ramon. All those decisions are made by the San Ramon Unified School District, independent of the city. They have their own funding source. And we could not deny a housing project on the basis that, well, you're putting too many kids in that area, they'll overcrowd the school, so we're going to deny the application. We can't do that as a matter of state law. So all those issues about overcrowding in the schools, they have existed, but they're basically beyond our control. One of the things we talked about is retail. One of the things that didn't come up, and probably because everybody up here knows this, but I'm not sure how many of the people in the audience do. We have a designation of mixed use called mixed use residential emphasis. And I want to make it clear that the term mixed use is somewhat of a misnomer because there is no requirement in that district that a developer actually include any non-residential use in any development. A developer can build the project 100% residential. What it does is gives the developer the option to set aside some of that space for a non-residential use like a coffee shop, a restaurant or the like, but it does not require that person to do so, unlike the mixed use commercial emphasis district. So when we look at the mixed use, you need to take those areas with a grain of salt because there's no guarantee that there will be any commercial development in those areas. As you can see from some of the projects that have been proposed and under construction in San Ramon, if you have for sale units, it's somewhat unlikely that there will be any commercial as part of that development, maybe for apartments, maybe for condos, but unlikely for single family homes. I know the city council has coming up the inclusionary housing ordinance. I would like you to take a close look at that and look at the consequences of what you're being asked to do, particularly on pushing back the turnover date of affordable housing. I think I spent some time cross-examining Ms. Yee. I hope she took it okay. I think she's been through it before on the core area on the Chevron Park property. And here's the reason I brought it up was this. There is a huge potential for us to save retail space by developing that property. But it's also important that we develop the property the way we've been talking about over the past year, which is to have a combination of retail and housing. And so I was happy to hear from Ms. Chamberlain that as part of our discussion next month or later this month, we'll actually have what I think can be described as maybe a mini master plan proposed for that I am pretty sure will be an enforceable agreement by the time we're done with it. So we make sure that what we've been promised will come fruition. And it's important because there's only a limited amount of retail space in San Ramon that exists. It is very difficult, as our city manager pointed out, to really develop more because we just don't have the space. Look how long it took us to get a Trader Joe's in San Ramon. We've been looking for a Trader Joe's since I moved here in 1995. We finally got one a couple of years ago. So we just don't have the space to turn over to do that. And we have two projects that it's programmed for. Again, I use the word program because there's no legal binding effect. Part of it is the City Walk project because you have about 175,000 square feet that is programmed for commercial development. mostly to serve the people that are in the 4,500 units that are programmed for that area. But also in the Chevron Park area, they're talking about 150,000 square feet of retail and commercial space along Bollinger. That will provide some of the retail space that we need. We're doing what we can to protect what we have. That's why I brought up Crow Canyon Commons and the Country Club Center, because we don't have a lot outside of the neighborhood shopping centers that we're trying to protect. So I was very pleased that even if we don't immediately do Chevron Park, we have enough liquidity, so to speak, in our housing element to allow us to rezone some of the shopping centers to preserve the retail that is already there. Lastly, on the Gelderman property, if it wasn't clear from my questioning, I really don't think we should change that space into open space. I don't think it's necessary. If you have it as either hillside residential or what it really amounts to is conservation, retail residential conservation. 80 to 90% of that is going to be retained as open space, and you give the landowner an opportunity to build a couple of homes up there. That's not going to cause anybody a problem, but it gives them some use of the property. It avoids a claim that the city is taking away their property rights. So I haven't heard a convincing argument why we should change the designation of that property. And maybe at our next meeting, I'll hear it, but right now I haven't heard that. So I think we're chugging along. We're getting it down to sort of the short strokes. I think we're doing the best job the city can, given the constraints that our friends up in Sacramento have placed on us. So as you know, we've been working hard on getting this done in a timely manner so we can convince the overlords in Sacramento that what we said on our housing element, we really meant. Thank you for your time. Maybe we'll have another one of these meetings, but by then it'll be pretty much well done. So thank you for your time.
Council members, comments?
Yeah, I'll start it off. Thanks to our planning services folks for all the work they put into this. Thank you to the planning commission. I know you've seen it a lot more than we have at the city council level. And thanks to the community for all their input and the multiple meetings and our committees who've been participating as well. I think it's a great piece of work, but obviously there's some things that need to be refined. I remember when we were talking about the housing element, we talked about objectifying development standards and things like that. So, I was glad to see that we've got some definitions for the mixed use residential and the mixed use commercial emphasis, although there's not too much difference between the development standards. And I appreciated your caution on what you said about, what does that really mean in terms of the residential emphasis and what a developer might potentially do with that. But I think it does provide some intent as to which is better than what we had before as far as what the city wants done in that space. Regarding the Gelderman property, kind of the first time I'm really getting into this issue, and I think I want to study it a little bit more before I kind of come down with how I feel about moving from hillside residential to open space. I kind of read in the staff report what I believe probably came from the city attorney in terms of the California government code and this code 65800. This code that gives discretion, wide discretion to the city on what we can do in terms of land use authority. But as I think somebody during the public comment mentioned, this is the same comment I had, there's in the last few years, there's been hundreds of housing laws. So, we have a whole new environment here that probably with all these new housing laws that have diluted a lot of that local control that we had in the past to do our, local zoning and things like that. So, yeah, we might be able to do that and be on the high ground in terms of from a legal perspective. But I want to kind of study that a little bit more from my own personal perspective before I kind of really make it kind of a call on how I feel about making that change. I do think at some point we need to resolve the DMU South issue. And I know there's all the no net loss issues and taking some of the housing off and no net loss and all that, but I mean, we've been talking about Chevron Park for a year. And so it just makes sense to me that we do this all at the same time. If we're able to do that without creating a lot of difficulties. And then regarding some of the alternatives that were proposed in the plan for like Country Club Village and Marketplace, I like the idea that there is, this, what seems to me a little clear protection of some of the retail that we have, instead of it just being mixed use, where who knows what can happen. There's kind of that retail, mixed use residential, or even the mixed use commercial emphasis designation, but it seems that we're protecting at least parts of the retail space in those alternative proposals. So other than that, I already said my comments in terms of at some point, I think we also need to look at the West Side specific plan, see if it's time to sunset that or not. At some point, it may outlive its usefulness, but other than that, well done thus far. And thanks for the commission digging into this, and I look forward to your future efforts as you chug through it. Thank you.
Marisol or Sridhar or Scott?
Yeah, we'll just go down the line here.
Okay.
I agree with Gene that we need mention of City Walk, and we went to a lot of effort to create City Walk, and it needs some mention in here. I'm not exactly sure where it goes, but you guys are smart enough. You know where that goes.
Walking district.
Walking district and City Walk and all that. Yes. Thank you, Gene. And yeah, Dave and we've heard the West Side specific plan, kill it or revive it, do something with it, put it on your next work plan after I guess sometime after the CAP, or when you run out of things to do and you're just sitting around dealing cards or playing whatever you guys do. You run out of things to do. Oh, come on. Well, when you're actually going home on time, let me put it that way. Yeah, let's revive it or kill it. And I feel very strongly we need to make some comment about the radio, the emergency radio systems, whether it's just another 3 sentences in that paragraph. Somehow I want to make sure developers know that they're on the hook for radio systems. Thank you. Oh, thank you, staff and planning commission, for all the hard work you guys put into this. Yeah, we come in the last minute and spend a couple hours and go, yay, and you guys spend hours and hours and hours. I know. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for your leadership and all the great work. It need a lot of attention details, and thanks for taking all my questions patiently. Appreciate it. And thanks our planning commission for helping us with all these details that like 350 pages plus on EIR, another 750 pages. Oh my God, it's like tons of work. So for me, the general plan definitely is like pretty much like a constitution for me. So I take this for what we are going to do. So for example, like as I agree with Commissioner or Chair Wallace about school district, for example, that we cannot do or we cannot deny a development application because of the school district or water district, but we can plan though, right? So it's not like we cannot deny, but at the same time we can plan. Let's plan it. Let's use this as our guidelines, or so that we make sure that we provide the required services that we are promising. As I mentioned, right, packet page 66 clearly says that we need to provide a quality life. These are the things that we want to achieve. So whether it is a school or even the retail, again, I want to put emphasis on Doherty Valley, especially the village center. We definitely need that. The whole community is literally crying out some help with that. They need to have a minimum convenience stores where they can go and get things that they want, basic stable things. So we definitely need help on that one. And also one more thing I want to put is like, I didn't see anything about nonprofit. So one of the best thing about San Ramon is our nonprofit organizations. That's the quality of our life improved because of their great services. So I want to see how we can help them in any way. I don't have any ideas at this point, but if we can include any of the support that we can do, that will be great. And one more thing, final thing I want is that that light train corridor post, could you please remove that sign? We are getting like regular requirements and people are thinking, our community residents still thinking that there will be a light train corridor coming there. So please.
That is still the stupidest idea that the county has ever come up with.
They still
once
contend
again,
on.
Thank you. Thank you very much once again.
So thank you as well on my part for all of your hard work. It's very self-evident that it was very thoughtfully done. I will echo just quickly something that was said earlier, making sure that we put a lens on workforce housing for essential and frontline workers and teachers. I think that's important. But also, again, reiterating that the importance of trying to see how we can think about how we can seek to attract commercial businesses that align with our community's skills and job sectors. In terms of the school transportation, that is correct. The actual management of that is through the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. The only part that I can see I'm actually concerned about is that if they are being relocated to different schools to accommodate capacity at the different locations, will it increase traffic? Well, and that's on the city side, our concern. But on the unified school district side, will there be prolonged bus transportation times now? Do we have an
The school
inefficiency?
district doesn't run the bus system.
The traffics, I mean. I'm talking
Traffics
about- yeah.
is an independent board.
Okay, so I'm talking about the bus transportation.
So if you
The-
have to kids go to drop like next 10 miles, then you're adding more buses and not more cars.
And there's more longer waiting times and all of
Then
that.
it's incumbent upon traffics. to
Right.
Deal with it, not the school district.
Right, okay. And so, so that the city side would be the traffic concern is what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at. And so that would be my concern in terms of the schools. The other thing is, as I mentioned, I do like the better balance being laid out between residential, commercial and retail land use to increase walkability and bikeability as we build out. I think that was very well done and thought out. In terms of the designation of the Gelderman properties, I agree with Vice Mayor Armstrong. I would need more information. The only thing that I think about is that it's a tad bit awkward the way where it's positioned in terms of, I would like to see an EIR report or something to that effect that would explain to us how, what if any disruption it could cause to wildlife habitat, because it is kind of, there's this open space on the left and right, and there's this gap in the middle, right? Is there any disruption in that area? Does it cause any? Oh, if you can answer, that would be awesome. But if you can't, then I understand.
So to address the comment about, at least from the land use and the changes that are being proposed now, the change is really just, on paper as far as the direction that we expect land use to be for that area. But not until a project actually is proposed and we look at what is part of that proposal, can we better evaluate how that project will impact the habitat or other sensitive resources in that area.
Mhm.
And so that is something that would be, if there was ever if we left it at Hillside Residential and somebody were to propose a project there and request annexation to the city as part of that whole process, we would then evaluate it through an environmental review process.
Okay, but we can't get any preliminary report on that. beforehand,
Well,
before we finalize.
What do you evaluate?
when we last made the change from open space to hillside residential, there was a environmental review that was done as part of that land use general plan process. There is an evaluation as part of this review that looks at the new land use plan that would for the planning area that would then convert it from hillside residential to open space, and then illuminate the potential for future urban land there. I can at least speak to, at least from the environmental standpoint on that side, because we're essentially doing a down zoning, right, of that property, which would have a better environmental outcome because of the down zoning to not allow for the residential at the capacity that hillside residential would allow. So as far, it would be a better environmental outcome because of the change to open space, as opposed to keeping it as hillside residential.
Thank you so much for that information. And that was it. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay, anyone else? Because I had a couple comments. I get. Everybody wants to bring in retail. It's key. I mean, I'd love to see it too in the shopping. Fortunately, we have some centers where we can add retail to it. And I'm hoping that they keep bringing people in and are successful. Less competition. Some of the things that concern me tonight are the retail is important. I'm not saying it isn't, but what we really are focusing is jobs, housing, balance as part of the sustainable community strategy that's in SB 375. Because what was pointed out is all these new laws from Sacramento keep changing things for us. Well, another law that's going to change some things for us will be with Church of the Valley, because you get to double count the parking to some extent. So working with them might be very important in the sense that the state seems to think that you don't get to get more parking if you already have the parking spaces there, which are only the idea being Sunday is used. And then, but this, I forgot, I think that was one of Scanner's lovely things. Can't put that one on my friend from San Francisco, but the idea that we're doing these sustainable community strategies, jobs, housing, balance is what's going to change not so much just the commute, but the thinking of the businesses that we're trying to bring in. Because San Francisco can't produce the housing for them. Oakland isn't giving them the housing that they want, where they want, but being able to walk or bike or the transit that we're setting up in that all of Bishop Ranch is extremely important in when you do the development that goes in, or whether it's housing or not. Go San Ramon, I think, is still only a pilot program, but I think that one's going to make it, where people are pretty much guaranteed that they can get a ride to BART, or if they still want to work in the city or even out at the airport. But we're ahead of the game on that one. And just keep going that way. But I'm concerned, like everyone else, that we're creating one of these retail deserts as we do everything housing. But I think it could be worked out. So I think you got your hands full, but you're on the right track. I like the idea of the conservation residential also that works both ways. And you had the owner of the property come in and tell you that as long as they can do something. The thing that worries me the most about Hillside up there is drive down that road in the daytime heading east. You can't see, you're blind. It's just this, you're looking straight at the sun. So that, I mean, to me, that's a difficulty you don't get to look at. But on Church of the Valley, like I told you, the park, what bothered me was never the creek before. It's the fact that you're that close to the freeway. It's the greenhouse gas emission and the noise that got my attention. And I didn't believe what was on the paper, and that's why I voted against it. But I think it's going to be time where something's going to have to be worked out. So I think you got your hands full. And it sounds like it can be, but if we have to stick to every one of these laws coming out of Sacramento and we can't put the required parking for it, then we're going to have the same people coming in here. So know what's coming. All right. Anything else for anyone else? Last minute thoughts? Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to adjourn this meeting tonight in honor and memory of Diane Feinstein, who passed away a couple days ago.
Thank you.